Hi, folks. This is a intro to the intro I'm adding after the recording of the whole episode has been finished. Apparently, there was an infiltrator into our town of Tekoa this morning who managed to stab somebody before being killed. So there is a little bit of background noise in Daniela's letter and some of the other pieces. A little bit less time was available today to do the editing process, so I hope you enjoy the episode, and I think even more than before, what I'm talking about here is relevant. So please have a listen, and hopefully next week things will be back to normal. Thanks. Shalom, and welcome to the Jewish Geography Podcast. I'm your host, Rabbi Eitan Levy. Until now, I've shied away from current events on the show, partly because of my business. As a tour guide in Israel, nothing is worse for business than talking about the latest round of violence going on here. But I want this to be a space for me to address whatever is going on in the Jewish world without pulling any punches, so I'm changing the policy. And though tourists are scared away by the news, the truth is it's really not that dangerous here. As Daniela is going to discuss in her letter to Josep for this episode, the chances of a person getting stabbed here are actually pretty low, and if you compare it to the violent crime rates in a lot of big cities in the US, we still come out safer here, including the terrorist attacks, because Israel has a very low violent crime rate. So the terrorists are achieving part of their goal. Without actually doing a lot of physical damage, they are doing massive damage to one of Israel's key industries, tourism. Don't let them. Cancel those tickets to Mexico for spring break and bring the family to Israel instead. Show your kids what it means to stand up for truth and goodness in the world with your feet and your wallet, not just with words. If you're Jewish or a friend of the tribe, come and show your support. Show us that we're not alone. You have no idea how much we appreciate it. And if you are Jewish, come visit your family. We love you. We want you to drop by so we can overfeed you and tell embarrassing stories about when your parents were your age. Either way, now is the time to start planning your trip for the spring or summer. So go on over to rabbieitan.com. That's RABBIEITAN.com. Check it out and be in touch. Now on with the show. I recently had the opportunity to take some tourists I was guiding to see an exhibit on Hadrian at the Israel Museum. Hadrian was a Roman emperor around the year 130 of the Common Era. He loved Greek art, thought, and culture. He was relatively tolerant for the period, a good administrator, and traveled with his male lover all over the empire. The Romans referred to him ever after as one of the 5 good emperors, but in the Jewish world, he has a very different reputation. For us, he's the SOB who finished off any significant Jewish presence in the land of Israel by killing 500,000 of us after inspiring a revolt when he built our holy city, or rebuilt, I should say, as a pagan city, with a temple to Jupiter in the place where our 2 temples had stood. We remember him as a man who murdered and expelled so many Jews from our land that only a smattering remained to keep the flame of Jewish life burning here during 2,000 years of exile. Hadrian wasn't the only otherwise tolerant man of empire to have a special place of hatred in his heart for the Jews. When the Greeks conquered the Holy Land under Alexander, the administration they set up here quickly learned that these barbarians, these Jews, were different. Everywhere they went, the Greeks just asked for the locals to put the Greek gods in their temples along with their local gods. Later, the Romans did the same thing. And in both cases, the Romans saw that only this one stubborn, backward, superstitious group of people who were strangely allergic to nakedness refused. Only this one people had the gall to say that their God was not a God, but rather the one and only God of heaven and earth. But the Greeks were good politicians, and they didn't want to have unhappy subjects on their hands, so they allowed the Jews to keep their temple free of foreign gods, only asking that the other laws be respected, and that a special tax be paid in lieu of Greek army service, which had many aspects which didn't so much work out for Jews who were religious, such as getting kosher food and taking off the Sabbath. But over the years, you know what? Greek culture was pretty attractive, so a lot of Jews started to adopt Greek ways. And one emperor, Antiochus Epiphanes III, thought the savage Jews were now ready to act like civilized people, that is, like Greeks. So he outlawed key Jewish practices like circumcision and public reading of the Torah, and placed idols in the Holy Temple. This was the background for the anti-Greek revolt, which we celebrate in the holiday of Hanukkah, where a small band of Jews fought off the Greek army and re-established an independent Jewish state in the land of Israel that lasted for 100 years. But then the Romans came, and they had the same problem and used the same solution. But after 2 revolts against the rule of Rome in Judea, Hadrian had lost patience with these stiff-necked monotheists. He scattered them to the 4 corners of the empire, renamed their holy city, now rebuilt as a pagan city, Aelia Capitolina. He renamed the land of Israel Syria Palestina, after the traditional enemies of the Jews, the Philistines. He took it as his purpose to wipe out any national existence of the Jewish people in the land of Israel. But you know what? Even when the Roman Empire became monotheists, adopting the closest sister religion of Judaism, Christianity, as the state religion, they still could not find a place in their hearts for those pesky Jews. The Jews just refused so stubbornly to accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior, so they had to be kept around, but lowly and poor. Then, through the Middle Ages, we were despised because we supposedly killed Jesus, and then later, because we were poor and lowly. Then, as we came to serve a certain economic function in some European countries and some of us became wealthy, we were hated for being wealthy. When we kept to ourselves, we were hated as haters of humanity from the Greeks onward. In fact, even the Egyptians before them have written statements to that effect. When we tried to integrate, we were hated as social climbing outsiders. When we left our religion and became secular, the Germans decided it was something inherent, something biological that was the real reason to hate us. And through it all, Jews just continued to be the most obnoxious people on the face of the earth, refusing to accept the common wisdom of the world's dominant cultures, whatever they might be, from ancient Egypt to ancient Greece and Rome, through the age of Christianity, the rise of Islam, through the Enlightenment and the dawn of secular humanism. Jews just keep on doing our own thing, and that pisses off everybody. And thankfully, as a card-carrying member of this most annoying tribe, I feel a certain pleasure when I think about how much my very existence makes millions of people around the world angry. I swell with pride when I think of how many of our neighbors here in the Middle East and their Jew-hating supporters from all over the world want me dead just because I'm a Jew, and I have the nerve to insist on 2 things. 1, being a Jew, and 2, being alive. The couple I was guiding at the Hadrian exhibit, Dave and Julie, are such sweet people. They're Americans from Boston, Gentiles, and just really gentle and kind people. It was really a pleasure spending time with them. Julie had noticed this thing about Israelis. So she presented an academic paper at a conference and just thought they were being really harsh about her presentation. They just kept challenging everything she said. I reassured her that in Israel, challenging what you're saying doesn't mean they don't like you or even that they disagree necessarily. It's just that they insist on exploring everything you say to its farthest possible logical conclusion. They want to challenge anything that's not written in stone, and even then sometimes. It's just the culture here. It's a very Jewish culture, and it doesn't reflect on their feelings about you or your work. I think that helped her feel better about it, and she went on to make more presentations, I hope with more confidence after our discussion. There is something we live for as believing Jews, and even for the non-believing, it permeates the Jewish culture, which is our faith. And there is a character trait that helped us stay different throughout thousands of years of dominant cultures trying to iron out our weirdness. For thousands of years, we have not only stubbornly refused to die, we have stubbornly refused to become like everybody else. We have a 4,000-year history of defiantly stepping on the toes of the world's great superpowers, the cultural behemoths of every era, sticking like a bone in the throat of their self-satisfied sureness that their way is the best way. And today is no different. Now, when we have the nerve to shoot terrorists with knives in their hands, who are actually in the act of trying to stab people to death, that seems to really annoy some people. I guess we're committing the crime of not dying while Jewish. The Swedish foreign minister, anyway, seems to think we're out of line here. Well, we've refused to die at the hands of much more formidable enemies over the eons, and these terrorists and their defenders in the Swedish government are on the wrong side of the eternal people, and thus will be on the wrong side of history. Because you can argue all you want about who's right, but we are going to survive, and we are going to write this as just another chapter in the book. thanks for letting me get that off my chest, folks. Now, I gave a sort of a grand, sweeping, look-through-history kind of perspective on what's going on here, but Daniela is going to put more of a human face on it. This week's Letter to Josep is about the 5 secrets of Israeli resilience against terror. You know, over a few thousand years of people trying to kill us, we've come up with some pretty decent coping mechanisms. Now here's Daniela.
Back in October, a friend of mine from high school, the phenomenally talented artist and animator Ruth Bortz, drew this cartoon that expresses so well what the security situation felt like at the time. You can see the cartoon on the post on letterstojosep.com. I'll describe it for you. It's a picture of a woman who is thinking, and in her thought bubble is sort of a board game like Snakes and Ladders with all these ladders, and dispersed throughout this board are pictures of soldiers and Molotov cocktails and fires and rocks and buses. And I feel like it expresses it so well, because it really is like navigating a game of Snakes and Ladders. You try to live your life normally, praying you will land on a safe space, and you try to make the choices that will keep you and your family safe, but ultimately, you feel helpless to protect yourself and your family. This is how terror works. While statistically we are much more likely to be killed in a car accident, the high profile of these incidents keeps us afraid. Eventually, the terrorists believe it will wear us down and weaken us to a point where we will just give up and leave. Apparently, they don't know who they're dealing with here. They call us the eternal nation for a reason. We don't get weak when we are threatened. We get stronger. Palestinian terror is just one unpleasant and fairly unimpressive blip in the centuries-long timeline of horrors we have survived. When I gave you a security briefing during another rough time last year, you said, "I wonder how you live like that." I responded, "A lot of dark humor." While that is an important and my personal favorite coping mechanism Israelis tend to employ, there are others, and I want to tell you about them today. But let's start with that one. Number 1, dark humor. So here I posted a meme that I made based on a Hebrew meme that I saw on Facebook the previous week. And it's a picture of a knight in full armor, and it says, "I'm heading to the store. Need anything?" Yep. I've written about this typically Jewish coping mechanism before, but I really think it's a fascinating sociological phenomenon. Israelis make a point of laughing about tough situations. I told you about how during the war last year, Hamas tried its hand at using social media to intimidate Israelis, and how that backfired big time. Their efforts were met with an onslaught of mockery, from the popular parodies of their propaganda music video to the hilarious responses to their hacking of a Domino's pizza page. This period is no different. No matter what you do to us, we will never stop laughing. Humor helps us in a few ways. It helps create some distance between us and the threat, which makes it feel less scary and threatening. It's hard to be afraid of something ridiculous. Number 2, it brings us together, increasing solidarity. See item 3 below. Number 3, laughter is an excellent medicine. It oxygenates the blood, increases endorphin and dopamine levels, decreases stress hormones, and burns calories to boot. Here are a few of the jokes that were getting tossed around on social media during October. "I hate this kind of weather, where you don't know whether to wear long sleeves or a bulletproof vest." That's from Yotam Zimri, Israeli comedian. Apparently, terrorist groups are paying Palestinian kids $30 to throw rocks at soldiers. They don't realize we're so underpaid that we'd throw rocks at ourselves for half that price. That's from an anonymous Israeli soldier. And the background of this one is that one of the attacks in October was carried out by an Arab employee of Bezeq, a large telecommunications company. So Israeli comedian Michael Boutir says, "Me, your employee just stabbed me. Bezeq, have you tried taking out the knife and reinserting it?" As per item number 2, which we will get to in a moment, there are a bunch of videos going around demonstrating knife defense techniques, some more helpful than others, and some making fun of the ones that were less helpful. There's a link to one of the funnier ones on the original post on letterstojosep.com. The second secret to Israeli resilience against terror is fighting spirit. On the night 2 Israelis were stabbed to death in Jerusalem a week and a half ago, Bon Jovi performed in Tel Aviv. He dedicated a new song of his called "We Don't Run" to Israel, saying that it should be Tel Aviv's fight song. Eitan and I have been listening to it on repeat ever since.
Not afraid of burning bridges, 'cause I know they're gonna light my way. Like a phoenix from the ashes, welcome to the future, it's a new day. We don't run, I'm standing my ground. We don't run, and we don't back down. There's fire in the sky.
Nailed it, John. One of the most remarkable things about the attacks in the past week or so is that the terrorists have been neutralized within minutes, not only by the police or security, but by ordinary passers-by, with ingenuity that does me proud as a self-defense instructor. In October, a terrorist stabbed a guy in Ra'anana, only to be pounced upon by several bystanders and beaten to a pulp. Another guy fought off a terrorist with his umbrella. One used a selfie stick. One martial artist happened to be carrying his nunchaku in his bag and jumped on a bus where a terrorist was being subdued, using his weapon to help neutralize him. As per item number 1 above, you can imagine we had a ball with this. Benji Lovett, Anglo-Israeli comedian, wrote, "I can't believe we wasted billions of dollars on the Iron Dome. Do you know how many umbrellas, nunchucks, and selfie sticks we could have bought?" Eretz Nehederet, an Israeli satire show, put out a cartoon of an army insignia for the neutralizing brigade featuring those 3 weapons. We don't run. We go out and buy pepper spray. We take self-defense classes and arm ourselves. And when a terrorist goes on a rampage, we don't run and hide and wait for someone to save us. We tackle that and give him what he deserves. Ben-Gurion, the first Israeli prime minister, is quoted as saying, "The entire nation is the army, the entire country is the front." Still true 70 years later. Number 3, solidarity and unity. I wrote about this during the war too. Nothing brings us together like an external threat. From sending gifts to the families of victims or food to the soldiers, to wishing strangers besorot tovot, good news, there is a strong sense that we are in this together, and we are here for each other. Solidarity from outside Israel helps a lot too. Jewish communities praying for our welfare and friends checking in on us make us feel that we are not alone, and give us a lot of strength. If you are reading about the situation in Israel and feeling angry and helpless, there's one simple and highly effective thing you can do. Just write a quick note saying you are thinking of us, or asking how we are. It helps more than you can imagine. Number 4, doing dafka. In other words, stubborn defiance. Footage from one of the recent attacks showed an Israeli soldier pointing her gun at a knife-wielding terrorist while still holding an ice cream bar she had been eating. This, of course, triggered a parody video of a guy doing all kinds of things while holding on to an ice cream bar. I'm not throwing away perfectly good ice cream just because I need to neutralize a terrorist. If that doesn't illustrate quintessential Israeli defiance in the face of terror, I don't know what does. One of the responses to the violence in the Old City of Jerusalem was a group of young men gathering at the Damascus Gate to study Torah. This is also a quintessential Jewish response. You want to scare away the Jews? We're coming, and we're bringing our Torah with us. They have been studying there regularly since the violence escalated. Like I said, the goal of terror is to weaken us, to disrupt our daily lives. We therefore go out of our way to show the terrorists that they have not succeeded, by dafka celebrating life and going about our regular activities with stubborn defiance. God called us a stiff-necked people in the book of Exodus. It was not a compliment at the time, but that same trait has served us pretty well in this context. Number 5, faith, seeing the big picture. It was during the Second Intifada that I became intimately acquainted with the Book of Psalms. Every time there was a serious terror attack, our teachers would hand out booklets of Psalms for us to read. And there were, unfortunately, many opportunities to do so. Prayer, and specifically the Book of Psalms, has been our go-to response to bad situations for centuries. To me, that book is the symbol of Jewish spiritual resistance. Faith in God doesn't mean I think that if I just believe and pray enough, nothing bad will ever happen to me. Faith in God means that no matter what happens, I trust that He is on my side, and that even if something bad happens, it's for the ultimate good. It means trusting Him to be with me and give me the strength to handle whatever comes. Reading the Book of Psalms helps me because it reminds me that I am not alone in my fear, anger, and yearning for a better world, that Jews have been feeling these things for centuries, and we have overcome. Faith as a coping mechanism also means seeing the big picture. The big picture is that this wave of violence is truly nothing compared to the bloodshed we have survived in the past, and it could be so much worse. Faith means seeing that each day is full of honest-to-goodness miracles. The fact that more Israelis have not been killed despite the best efforts of the hateful hordes is a revealed miracle, what we religious people call it when God's hand is very clear. It can be hard to think this way when you're in the depths of pain and despair, especially when someone has been injured or killed. That's fine too. Sometimes we are meant to focus on our little part of the picture and do what we can to improve it. But when we can pan out and take the long view, we can take heart. Because to the person of faith, flipping through the many pages of Jewish history, it is undeniable that someone is running the show. Someone who is on our side. That's the Jewish people for you. Afraid but courageous, broken but defiant, constantly arguing but united, questioning but keeping faith, crying, laughing, praying, mourning death, and most of all, stubbornly, audaciously celebrating life. And it is just that carries us through. During the war in 2014, Hamas MP Fathi Hamad said, "We desire death like you desire life." You betcha, Hamad. And may God grant us both what we desire. Hoping for better times very, very soon.
Last night, we were driving from Efrat via the tunnel road, that's Route 60, to Jerusalem around 7 p.m., and streams of vehicles were passing us in the other direction with sirens blazing. I was thinking back to the bad old days of the Second Intifada where people would count the sirens. You know, if you have one siren, it's whatever. If you have two, it might be something. If you have three or more, you already know it was a terrorist attack. I was imagining some sort of mass casualty event. That's the euphemism we use here for mass murder terrorist attacks. And how horrible is it that I was relieved when I found out only one person was killed? The article I saw says that Daphne Meir, God avenge her, was killed while defending 3 of her 6 children in her home in Otniel. That's a small town about halfway between Gush Etzion and Hebron, south of Jerusalem. Since she was the only casualty, I assume she was successful. She was a mother of 6, a nurse, and a halachic advisor for women with fertility issues. We call it a yoetzet halacha. Her whole life was about giving, protecting, and creating life. This is the Jewish spirit that lives in the people of Israel in our land. Give light, live with gusto, and fight the darkness to the end for even the slightest chance to live another minute, because nothing is more dear than life. Every day I find out how true famous or infamous statement is that we love death as much as the Jews love life. But I don't learn from it about the death cult of militant Islam. I know what they are. Rather, it teaches me about who we are, and how, despite our many faults and the world's attempts to destroy us, this is an ideal that we aspire to, and largely, to a miraculous degree, achieve. Am Yisrael, keep doing your thing. You know, when your enemy's boast is that you love life, you are doing something right. And those who would destroy us in this generation, as in every generation, who rise up against us, who desire death, may they get what they desire. That's all for this week's episode of Jewish Geography. If you like the show, please subscribe, write a review, share it on Facebook, and generally help us get it out there. You can find all the past episodes, as well as subscribe buttons, show notes, and more at rabbieitan.com. That's RABBIEITAN.com. And you can find Daniela's blog, The Letters to Josep, at letters2josep, that's JOSEP.com. My site, Rabbi Eitan, also has info on taking a tour with yours truly in Israel, so check that out. Until next week, this is Rabbi Eitan wishing you peace, joy, health, wealth, and all the good things in life. Stay strong and go be a light to the world.